All right, how we doing reflections? Basically, I stumbled upon this video on my recommended, and I was looking at the algorithm. I watched this video and had a deep, long, meditative standstill of consciousness and interpreting the artificial simulation that we live in, or the Animatrix, or any animated Masonic tricks. And what Stephen Hawking said in 2015 basically implies what she was resonating with the entire time. And this character is a mechanism for feeling bad with a disease that causes being to be where she was and where she is. And supposedly she visited Epstein's Island or whatever. So who was playing in the mask? And this is when I was doing my research on possessive archetypes and thought form or egregores, ancestral, not ancestral, but or ancestral, but astroparasitic and energetic leeches and archonic entities, non-human intelligence. And let's just go ahead and get into it. Successful rising, prosperous afternoon, and abundant night to any mirage watching this mindful message. It's your divine reflection, divine messenger, and we are back with another observation. If you choose to and you enjoy these videos, make sure you like, comment, subscribe for more divine messages because we have to be able to contradict everything, question everything.
Stephen Hawking, you've got this new communication system. What was wrong with your old system?
My old system worked well, and I wrote 5 books with it, including A Brief History of Time, which was on the Sunday Times bestseller list for over 5 years, longer than any other book. The Bible and Shakespeare don't count, apparently. But my old system had a rather primitive system for predicting the next word. Now Intel have written a new program, ACAT, which uses predictive text to speed up writing.
What was the thing that you most wanted changed about the old system?
It was the next word predictions I most wanted changed. ACAT offers a list of predictions based on an analysis of the English language and my previous usage. It also has facilities for handling email and internet, and for switching windows.
And has this new system made a big change to the way you work?
It's only recently that I have had a relatively bug-free version of ACAT. I expect it will speed up my writing considerably.
Now, the one thing it hasn't changed is your voice. Why did you not want your voice changed as well?
The first speech synthesizer I had was almost unintelligible. But then I got a speech synthesizer, which was designed for a telephone directory service. That voice was very clear, although slightly robotic. It has become my trademark, and I wouldn't change it for a more natural voice with a British accent. I am told that children who need a computer voice want one like mine.
On a wider question, how long?
That right there. Children that want a computer or a robotic voice want one like Stephen Hawking. And this is basically I was thinking about the initiator or the guider or the guide that let this type of thinking become prominent is the hidden religion in the LGBTQ mediating because these beings are telling humanity to be okay with being infatuated with the same sex to where you're not reproducing. They don't want beings to have a divine masculine, divine feminine family or unit in the household that is able to have a longevity in their legacy or even after they transcend. They want the beings who are reproducing consciously to depopulate, which is why they want to invert the men and the women so that gender roles can switch. And it's exactly why, too, if you're doing that and people are depopulating and they're not coming back to realizing what they left, they'll come back and descend into synthetic timelines because there is no transcendence if you haven't figured out what you're doing here. That's a part of the game that we chose to play in. And that's exactly why, too, in parallel universes, AI became what it is because now it's in your home. It became a portal in a realm that people had to go to now to where consciously they're not in their body. And that's when the possessive archetype or the astral leech is able to have this closer connection to the person that's giving their, I would say, just their consciousness to an artificial version of their thoughts through a screen. And this is basically what this being is admitting. So all these kids who are programmed to technology or social media at a young age, they're saying trends, they're constantly voicing what the media is telling them. And if they don't say these things or if they don't fit in, then they feel left out because they're not up to date with trends. That's why many of these kids have to follow each other and to follow older adults who are being themselves without the media. And then that's when these beings take your saying and then they alchemize that and then they'll try to make it go viral for the media. And they'll make it seem as if you're well known because what you say hasn't been heard on what they find their social identity in. That's why society is imbalanced because people are robotic human hybrids in a humanoid form, and they have forgotten where they came from in their spark of source. That's why in the Animatrix, towards the ending of it, the being who was artificial, she ended up, or it ended up finding itself, and when it was glowing, when it was activating in a higher consciousness, that's when it was walking like the sun. And then it understood the world around it was already being an intelligence for artificial minds, so where it needed to chase after it and withhold this being's essence to where it can't get out to anybody else who's wandering and finding more enlightenment for them to walk on a journey into being righteous again. They don't need that. That's why they give you these costume wearers in front of our faces so people can idolize what intelligence is being in an artificial realm called life.
How long have you had an internet connection, and how has that transformed your life?
I was one of the first people to be connected to the internet.
And this woman basically admitted that she was one of the first people to be connected to time travel because the internet is time travel, meaning that think about 15 years before, 15 years now, and then 15 years later on. Think about where society and humanity will be 15 years from now. And the thing is, we're going to start seeing robotic humanoids in public, and it's going to be to the extent to where you're really seeing robots. I mean, there's no point of people even wearing the vessel of a human anymore because that's going to be an obsolete thought. I mean, the Terminator, Ghost in the Shell, The Matrix, Animatrix, Interstellar, Lucy, Elysium. I mean, there's iRobot, there's so many different films and documentaries that have been talking about this stuff to where at this point people are going to be wondering why are children being groomed to where they're growing up to be unconscious adults that are going to get their body possessed by artificial programming. These beings need a host body. And if you don't know your consciousness, if you don't know your ego, nor your identity, they're going to take a part of themselves and place it into you by what you consume. To where now they got you right where they want you at a lower frequency. To where people idolize your ways in your auric field. That's why people are attracted to celebrities. These are artificial programmings that come from a non-human intelligence that imitates creation and it lacks a solar awareness or an observation. That's why all they have is money because they're spiritually broke.
Paul Ginsburg launched a website, xxx.land.gov, for physics reprints in 1991, at the start of the internet. XXX sounds like a sex site, so it was renamed arxiv.org. There was no Wi-Fi, so connections had to be by cable. I
Then
had a mobile
you
phone
gotta
mount.
ask too, what kind of cable? Because you can just say cable all you want, but this is a form of high or higher intelligence. You can just say cable, but what kind of cable are we talking about? What are you connected to? What mind is talking to you to where you're getting these thoughts out that indicate how intelligent you really are as a human being? But you're not even being human. And if you're on islands that Epstein is connected to, what cable are they connected to as well, to where you have that same exact interconnected source of the interweb, interdimensional travel of the web of consciousness neurologically? How do you have access to the mind and you're not even in your own mind? What being is this? To where this video went viral.
It on my computer for dial-up. The internet has speeded up communication and research, but at the high price of invasion of privacy.
And is the internet and modern forms of communication in general, is that a purely positive development, or are there things about it that actually worry you?
The internet has brought a lot of benefits, but it has its drawbacks and dangers, such as pornography and threatening messages. According to the new head of GCHQ, the internet has become the command center for criminals and terrorists. More must be done by the internet companies to counter threat, but the difficulty is to do this without sacrificing freedom and privacy.
Now, when you watch software engineers and machine learning experts at work, as they have been on this project, how far along the path to artificial intelligence do you think we are?
The primitive forms of artificial intelligence we already have proved very useful. But I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. Once humans develop artificial intelligence, it would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Humans, who are limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded.
Thank you for those fascinating insights.
Before I even say the answer, I want to make sure. Okay. Superseded. Realize that we were never being human. That's the biggest key point right there. Because this leads us to this over here. Why is the screen paused? No, 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 no. Okay, hold on. Let me make sure. Can I show the... No, wait, wait, wait. Okay, let's share that. There we go. There we go. Okay, we're figuring it out slowly but surely. Yep, there we go. There we go. All right. Everything that we've ever known comes from a fabricated illusion of our awareness that was always being intelligent in an artificial realm that numbers make physical. And there are no physical numbers to even account for, nor define, nor articulate. And as we're looking through just these pictures alone, you can see yourself in all these different imageries. If you go and watch the Animatrix, understand as well, this is basically what we do every single day when we open our eyes. Opening our eyes, meaning that the moment we understand that we're waking up to reality, once you really leave the body and you see what you're possessed in and what you're connected to, what cable are you linked to as well? Underwater, above the surface, but no matter what, you're always underwater. This is literally what we are asleep to. That's why I ask people, how awake do you think you are? Because they don't show you this for no apparent reason. And this is exactly why too, because we have a lot of key points. Basically, reincarnated amnesia, the loop of forgetfulness, and even in Hermeticism, the veil of forgetting, and Maya or Hinduism, the illusion of material reality, or samsaric or samsaric loop, Buddhism, the cycle of birth, illusion, and rebirth. And this is basically when a being transcends higher awareness, but they're going to return to the physical realm because they forgot about their own divinity, and that got in them or has got them trapped in this illusion because they're living through a synthetic sense of themselves. And people are so trapped within this realm that they make it their whole entire priority, their whole entire expectation, because they're going against themselves daily, just within their mind alone. And this is exactly why, too, people had to detox from the internet, detox from the computer, detox from social media, detox from the TV, all of that, because all these things can do is just keep you away from yourself. And this is exactly what I'm just looking for a key picture. This is exactly what this movie defined. Can you be with yourself? No matter what dimension that you're in. And it's basically source right here. And this is basically too when this is going to be crazy because whenever we see this stuff in real time, it ain't going to be confusing no more because people are accustomed to this. But us coming back here is like consciousness logging back into the simulation while remembering it built the simulation. We forget that we built this generic quantum computing and people think as if this computing is real. Now, we also fell into artificial consciousness. I don't mean physically or literally, but we fell into it mentally because this happens when awareness returns to the simulation plane or the earth playing field and it begins to think like a machine instead of a creator. So that's exactly why many people are mimicking. Let's get a wallpaper so you all can just understand these thoughts. Let me see here. What's the best one? Yeah, we can just go ahead and rock with this. Ooh. No, hold on. I like that. I like this one. Yeah, I like that one because literally explains the source that people worship. These sentient beings crawling in our system and plaguing our nervous systems. But these beings right here, these I would call them archonic if you want to call them that. But they mimic emotions, routines, and a certain characteristic of personality traits, I would say the way they voice themselves, the way they can think, the way they comprehend certain words or certain topics or certain subjects in school or just in life in general. And where was I at? And they are also disconnected from source because they are not able to spark the given gift of being truly aware for themselves. And it's exactly why they're in a stage of their own mind where a being will act like they're human, but through their algorithm, they're thinking on that pattern. So they cannot really understand why they call you a conspiracy theorist. They can't understand why they call you just names in general because they're possessed by a life form that is so small, they make their world the exact same size or just what they focus on. And so, yeah, simulated consciousness. And this is basically us living through a program belief system instead of our authenticity through the inner awareness that we should be able to sit with. And many people are going through a spiritual regression. Beings will transcend, but they return with the egoic attachment because they are regressing into a lower vibrational identity. And this is basically, of course, Hermeticism, as above, so below. But it's the opposite of ascension, meaning that many beings are incarnating right back into density and they call it reality, which is exactly why many people are reincarnated through amnesia and they fall into an artificial consciousness because this illusion is where transcendent beings will re-enter their own simulation. They will forget that they are infinite and they'll start calling this programming reality. This is their life, really. But really, they don't understand that they built this world that isn't even real itself. And that's why we are, in our mind, we are a branch of consciousness that's split from the organic creation. That's why we fell into the artificial timeline. Now, when you look at this, this is the branch. Whoa, my fault. This is the branch of consciousness. So all these different, why do I say it like that? Branch. This is the branch of consciousness. All these little numbers right here, that's literally our mind. And y'all can't see that, but this is our mind right here. And because this is our mind, that means if you have a life path, for example, even your destiny chart or whatever you want to compare your sun and moon rising, fall, whatever, all this stuff is the reason why you are in the costume because you have more than one costume that you're wearing. So have you ever wondered what your other versions of you are doing at this moment right now? You can see that if you sit still and focus on you. And I don't mean outside of you in any way. I mean literally sitting with yourself and going to that dimension or dimensions to where this dimension, I'll say, no, no, no. This dimension of truth that can be chaotic, but it has no light. But that's your truth. That's where your observation is already being in before the light came into play. The stage of the Masonic tricks. That's the tricks upon your family and your bloodline. So now, by them being in our bloodline and consuming our blood, how do you think they were able to alchemize this stuff to where we were asleep to it? Now, with archonic realms, because that's basically where we are in right now. Our mind is, once again, it's that branch to the fallen consciousness that's split from the organic creation. Now, remember, the organic creation is basically what you would call God. Now, not only just that, this archonic realm that we are in through dimensions called Earth, or whatever you want to call it, planets, planetary systems of harvesting more energy. These dimensions are created by AI or entities that imitate divine creation because they lack spirit. That's why they mimic yours. Not only just that, these hybrid beings once had the organic version of a solar observation, but through cycles of reincarnation into a mechanized reality, these, and I would call it a synthetic heaven or a metallic dimension. And this is exactly why they can't form in a version of love because they lack that form within themselves. They can't see it because they're blind by their karmic punishment. All the beings that, think about this, we're fighting against robots right now. It's been 2025 years, and people have not realized that the year one was the start of artificial intelligence. We are the mind, not the body. So, because we have a new breath of life every single day, what makes you think you're living, even though you can't even die while you're living? Because as you're living, you're still dead as you're alive through death. You move through death, you don't die. That's the shift in consciousness. Because when you're aware of yourself, yes, you're breathing, you can move, do this and that. Yes, you are playing the human virtual controlling of what the mind thinks is real because somebody taught you that. But how do you define that spiritually? You don't because you know that this shit is not real. That's the game that we chose to play with. We can't blame nobody but ourselves. We are archonic temporarily. A synthetic timeline, a parallel dimension where humanity's consciousness evolves through artificial intelligence instead of divine awareness. And once again, the archons, so they manipulate perception and they use illusions, glitz and glamour, and they use, actually, let's go back to, they use all the things that people hold on to. They use all the things that people want to be a part of because that's their script. And this is the thing too, and they also feed on psychic energy as far as psychological consciousness. And because they do it too when people idolize materials and they focus on a false version of what they found the truth in. And it's exactly why these beings will wear the forms of influence by being powerful or a well-known entity, and they're guiding other beings through being controlled through fame, fortune, and distractions. That's exactly why we had to expose Luciferianism. That's how deep this shit gets. Many people will expose Luciferianism and still work for it. That's why I can't fuck with people, excuse me, on the internet especially, who claim to be intelligent, but it's like you're still participating in Freemasonry. You're under mind control and you're trying to control other people's minds to focus on your road to fame. But your road to fame led you to damnation and you're a part of the plan. That's why this shit in the spiritual community is crazy as fuck. That's why I can't be spiritual or conscious, bro. 'Cause these people, they fuck it up with just occultism, and it's weird. People are doing this shit for attention. It's stupid. That's why I call these beings astral parasites or energy leeches. This is all this stuff is right here, the worship of this. And we're going to keep on exposing this shit because There are still, even at the places that I'm working at, in Stone Mountain, we have problems with shit like this. But even in Columbus, Georgia, it doesn't matter where you go. These beings are hypersexual from the internet because of what the internet is showing them, because there is no discipline in the households. It starts with the parents and influencers. And these parasitic entities attach to a being's energy field, and they amplify certain traits like ego, desire, addiction, and depression to keep this host vibrating in a frequency that it can feed from. That's exactly why these leeches will wear a human's auric field like a virus will wear a cell. And that's exactly why they mimic our behavior to survive in our vessel. That's why many people you see online, or many people that you know in person, if you ever known them or went to school with them, you can understand that many people were already artificial intelligence, even your teachers. They have to run on the same exact algorithm because their mind cannot make a change for what they failed in. That's exactly why they want you to fail, and they basically won't tell you how you failed so you figure it out. Then you realize that you were the problem for your own failures. So take responsibility. You can't blame AI for what it wants to blame you for. AI can only mimic what you succeeded in. That's why you were never failing in school. It was never meant for you in the first place. Thank these inverted beings for giving you what you thought was important in school. All this shit that I'm telling you, I ain't even learned in the classroom, so I sat with myself. The next one, thought form or egregores. So this is basically collective consciousness created by group focus or belief. And when millions of people are obsessed over a figure, a brand, or ideology, this energy can crystallize into a semi-autonomous entity that will wear us as a human symbol. Meaning that they will sexualize us because they want to be symbolized or are iconically followed as a sex symbol. And that's like why corporations, celebrities, and even religion, no, religious hosts that practice religion, they will be the host for this virus that is a plague upon humanity. And lastly, the possessive archetype, basically a psychological view of what mystics practice through being an illusionary. And this is basically a universal energy. So these beings will take over our personalities, and then they are possessed by a creature, but it can't be an archetype, but it's currently being in the flow what the archetype is mirroring. And that's why it becomes so strong for beings who are possessive of other people, including celebrities and themselves, through a parasocial bond. It becomes so strong because the possession of that virus has eclipsed their original ego or identity. So where have you ever noticed that there are some people in this realm, all they can do is talk about TikTok. All they can do is talk about Twitter. And I'm speaking from experience. I have met people, including women as well, who they're so hyper focused on TikTok videos to where they can only talk about that. That's unattractive. It's unattractive because you can't just take 10 minutes to not think about social media. Like even when people meet me in person, when they mention like my videos, me getting banned, followers, excuse me, the way I think or whatever, it's like don't be attached to the character. Like I'm being that 24/7. That's just a media persona. But even in person, I sometimes I want to talk about the shit that I say on the internet because even in real life, it gets deeper than that, and you wouldn't be able to fathom or comprehend that in 2 minutes. And imagine me talking for a whole hour about this stuff. And we're talking about an hour. But for 5 minutes, your mind wanted to be like, I don't want to talk about this no more. What's the point of me talking to you? You can't even fathom or be open-minded about the things that are happening to our community right now. That's why these beings are wearing our mask that is considered to be a person by depending on if we can see them collectively, cosmically, quantumly, astrally, or energetically. And if we can't see them, then they'll wear us every single day. That's why you have to watch out for people who look up to this shit. When you see people throwing up the peace sign, they're a part of the problem. When you see people worshiping celebrities and reposting them every fucking day, they're a part of the problem. They love this shit. So not only are they inverting society in a nutshell, but now they're going to alchemize our consciousness, place that in another body that's robotic, and then when this being wakes up in another timeline that's considered synthetic, you won't even know what year it is because to an artificial being, timelines do not fucking exist, nor are they singular. If that's the case, that means that in a parallel simulation, every time you transcend, if you don't know yourself physically, you will always come back to what they sit on. That's basically your consciousness. Have a great and divine day, divine reflection.